Those of you who are online, feel free to engage in the chat during this presentation. I know you can't whisper to one another right next to each other at the table, so online is a great place to do that, facilitate conversations, any insights, ideas, quotes that you get from this presentation. Feel free to use that and engage one another in that way. With that being said, folks, it is my pleasure to introduce your next speaker, who has over 13 years of experience as an HR strategic consultant and DEI trainer. She specializes in talent and organizational development. Her DEI wheelhouse includes focus groups, coaching, employee resource group development, impactful programming, advocacy conversations, and creating policies and practices that embody equity and inclusiveness. Please join me in putting our hands together for Ciera Parks.
Thanks, David. Can everyone hear me okay? So if you thought this was a presentation where you were going to whisper like you did for some of the other ones, you're wrong, right? This is an interactive session, and if you know me personally, if you've been in one of my training workshop sessions, you know that I am high energy and I will not accept people just being innocent bystanders. So if you've been sitting at your desk thus far, at your table seating areas, and you've been making your grocery list, if you've been online shopping, if you've been answering emails, I saw some people on LinkedIn, right? If you've been doing any of those things, right, this is not the session for that, because I have some stuff for you that I want you to take away today. Are we all good with that? Perfect. All right, so just to make sure we're on the same page, I want everybody to put 2 hands in the air. All right, so your hands do detach from your cell phones. I knew it. I knew it. It is so good to be back in a room with everyone, to be able to be with my HR folks. Right? It felt like Rocky Balboa coming up here. Right? I was ready to get in the ring with y'all today. So, my name is Ciera Parks. I am an HR consultant. I am a DEI trainer. I am the owner, founder of CWC HR Solutions and Training, which means I do HR strategy. And I'm also a person that does DEI. So I'm one of those people who do both, right? Live in the middle. I feel good about it. Today's session is still no diversity in your boardroom. Does that sound like anybody's organization? You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to, but you know it's true, right? And so what we're going to talk about today is how it is that we are 2 years out from one of the most tumultuous summers of our lives, and nothing has changed, or there's been no impactful change in your organization around diversity, inclusion, equity. Are we all aligned? Great. This table right here is super engaged. Everybody be like them, right? I don't know if it's because I'm kind of standing this way. I'll turn this way so you guys can do the same thing. It's like nodding and smiling. That's engagement. Free HR tip. So this is me, right, with different hair. It's summer. This is winter hair. This is summer hair. So I feel heard and I feel seen. I appreciate it. So I'm a strategic consultant, DEI trainer, mentor and coach, where I teach diverse folk how it is that they can go into the organization and they can feel seen, feel authentic, feel heard, feel represented. And then by day, I am a cannabis HR executive. Today's 420. Happy 420 to all of you who are aware and know what it is, right? Yes. So have tons of cannabis stories if you guys want to talk about what it looks like to be an HR person in cannabis, right? Come meet me at lunch, we can chat. So our objectives today, this is what's in your program, so you don't have to do anything with this, right? You don't got to write this. This was a freebie. It's assess where your organization is today, so that's where we're going to start. And then we're going to talk about how it is you can learn the first steps to approaching diversity initiatives in your organization. And then we're going to round it out with what your true obligation is to the organization as an HR leader in the space of diversity. Those are what you are planning, those are the things you're planning to get out of today's session. And you say, okay, cool, Ciera, well, how are we going to do that? Like this, right? 3 steps. Instead of using the word agenda, I like to use the word journey, because diversity is a journey. You are often going to be in a space in the diversity world where you don't always have the answer. Every situation is different. Every person is different. Every conversation is a tad bit different. People's emotions and how they react is going to be different. And so you can't always know everything. Diversity work is not something that has a clear start and a clear end. It's a continuum, right? You learn something new, something else happens, a law changes, right? The Crown Act gets passed, things like that. And so you have to be able to adapt with what's going on in the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to look back. So we're going to have everybody put on their thinking caps, little reading rainbow, right? Take you back a little bit. And then we're going to assess where you are today. So I'll give you some tools to truly start to think about what your organization is doing today. And then we're going to look forward. So what should you be doing in the next 18 to 24 months to make sure that you're capturing true strategy and true diversity goals and initiatives? Does that sound good to everyone? All right, 2 hands in the air. All right, perfect. So this session today is both a practical session to tell you how to do some of these things, truly to train you in this space. But it's also a session for you to understand how it is you should implement or start to have conversations about diversity in your own workforce. So this is one of the first points I want to stop at, and it's rules of engagement. So these are rules of engagements for us today, but also rules of engagement when you start to have conversations about diversity work in your organization. Rules of engagement are exactly what they sound like, but if we put them in more context of what we're doing here today, it's how are we agreeing to sit in this room together, engage with each other, and make sure that no one experiences hurt any more than they have to. That's what rules of engagements are. So the first one is be honest and transparent. The next one is lead with respect. Listen to hear. And this is a big one. Listen to hear. We are not fighting each other about each other's political beliefs, whether or not you believe in critical race theory. We are not fighting about topics in DEI, right? We discuss them for understanding to make sure everyone's point is heard and we understand people's viewpoints. And then just because we're all HR, right, we document, right? There's never a time we're not writing until we come to a conference and then we say, hey, no one else is looking, don't write anything down, right? So that is what's happening today. I'll loop back up to the be honest and transparent. There are going to be times where your perspective is not what everyone wants to hear. That's just what it is. But I want all of you to be honest today as we go through this session about what exactly it is happening at your organization. And if you are being honest and transparent, has work really been done? Or have we just took a couple pictures and said, hey, we're good? And we'll talk about that too. So we'll start with terminology first, because before we get into diversity, I want to make sure everybody has the same baseline of understanding of the verbiage that we'll be using. So the first one is diversity, right? Everybody feels good about that one, right? Everybody thinks they know what diversity is. Simply put, diversity means that if we are sitting in a room, everyone doesn't look the same. That's what it is, right? Very basically, there are different types of people in the room. And there may be times where you don't see the difference, right? There may be something like they have a mental disability that you can't see, right? So ableism for that matter. Next one is equity. We all have the opportunity to have our voices heard and counted in the same way. Inclusion, we all get to be included. So whatever the activity is, whatever the invite is, everyone got the chance to come, everyone was notified of it. And then there's these three down the side, a little less common that you hear. But have you guys started to see this DEI-B, A, J? DEI-J was real popular last summer. Did y'all see that? No one. Okay, that's fine. So we'll go through them today. So the first one is accessibility. And simply put, accessibility is the opportunity to be in the room or have access to an opportunity. That's accessibility. Justice. So I'll give you two definitions because I'm an HR freak, right? So I want everyone to write down organizational justice, just because it's a really great thing for you guys to be looking into as HR folks, organizational justice. Very similar to this level of justice and diversity work, and essentially it's if a person has experienced some hurt, some transgression, some type of offense in any way, there is a system, mechanism, or process within the organization that this can be righted. So there is a fix. We have a solution. We have a plan Some of you might call it crisis planning, depending on what happened, right? And then the last one is belonging. And I want everyone to kind of sit in this one for a few minutes. Belonging. Every one of us has been in a place where we felt like we were the outsider. Every single one of us. And I don't know what that environment might have been for you. For all we know, some of you might still be sitting in that environment in your workplaces. And if you are, call me, right? Let's talk. But you know what it feels like to be an outsider, for you to feel like you don't get to say what you want to say. Your voice is not heard. People don't accept you. You don't get to really have an impact on what happens, and things are just kind of happening to you. Now, we know what that, are we conjuring that feeling a little bit? All right, so then belonging is the opposite of that. Belonging is when you walk into a room and everyone knows you and you high five everyone, right? If you have small children, it's when you come home from work, right? Or you walk in the door and you're the best thing that ever happened to them. If you have dogs, I'm a dog mom, same thing, right? When your dog comes to the door and you've done nothing all day, but this dog thinks you're the best, that is what belonging starts to feel like. It's when you show up to a family barbecue and there's no beef happening, right? Like no one's mad at you for anything, right? And everyone's excited to see you. That's what belonging feels like. And if you can imagine what it feels like to come into a workplace every day where you feel that way, you have done a damn good job of diversity work. Belonging is the metric by which diversity is measured. And if you have done it well, your employees feel like they belong. Just the opposite. If you have not done it well, I'll tell you what it looks like just in case you don't know. If you ever have an after work event or an optional event, people leave. If you ask anyone to come out and hang out with you on the weekends, they don't come. If you have some type of optional training with your senior leadership team or meet and greets and people decide not to show up, if you do Zoom virtual happy hours and people don't log on, you are probably not doing a good job of belonging and engagement at your organization. Does that resonate? If you see people bolting for the door right at 4:55, they don't feel belonged. Because where you belong, you want to hang out a little bit more, right? You want to stay, you want to sit down, right? If you're from the South, you want to sit a spell, right? Anybody from the South? Just a few of y'all, okay. So you want to sit a spell, all right. So those are the terms that we'll be using today. Now, I will let you know that I will be using diversity synonymous with DEI and DEI synonymous with diversity, just for conversation's sake. We good with that? Great. All right, you guys are getting a little quiet. So unless we want another exercise. So let's talk about where we are, or where we were in 2020. So we talked about where we're going. We're going to step back and we're going to start to assess where we were 2 years ago. You know, it's been 25 months. 25 months since COVID hit last year and changed the way we look at our world. So kudos to all of you for weathering the storm. Just want to get a read on the room. If you were in HR 2 years ago, put your hand in the air. Just one. One is good. Okay, wow. Congratulations to you, right? Patrick, go ahead, take it, pat yourself on the back. That was a big deal, right? It was hard. It was a hard-ass summer. Can I say that? Okay. So 2 years ago, here's what stats were saying. Of the Fortune 500 companies, 200 of them was reporting that they had at least 40% diversity in their organization. I will tell you, 40% is sky high, right? That's almost half, right? If you guys do a little bit of HR math, that is almost half of your organization being diverse. Now, while this is a great number, kudos to those 200 companies, right? This is not the reality for most organizations. It's just not. When you think about the companies that are on the Fortune 500 list, those 200, or most of the 500 actually, have international branches, right? So they count those folks, right? They have multiple locations. They're scattered across the United States and the world. And so they are by nature going to be able to boast increased diversity numbers that other organizations just can't do because they don't have that type of footprint in the world, right? So this is a great number, right? Not necessarily the reality, though. We can agree to that. So I want to take you back here. This is a chart that I made. So the source is Ciera Parks, right? For those of you who do math, who math well, there's no numbers. There's very few numbers because I don't math well. But I do want to read you some things here. I'm HR. So if you see here, the blue line is the diversity line in America. And the red line is COVID. The gray line running through the middle is baseline, so 0. I'll let you look at that for a little bit, take it in, and then I'll give you some context around what this looks like, what this means. So if we start on the blue line, take yourself back to where you were January 2020, right? We just come out of winter if you're from the area, right? We're like, okay, this is it. Your PTO refreshed. You're ready to go. You probably took off a little bit more than you should have, but you were half days or something, right? At that point, you were still in the office, so people noticed when you didn't come to work, but that's okay, right? Because you're HR. Like, I had to go do something, right? It's okay. And you know what I mean. You guys know it's true. So then, we're all a little bit salacious. So what's happening, right? January 2020, if you remember, Harry and Meghan Markle, right? Do people know, everybody knows track? Okay, cool. So Harry and Meghan Markle decided they were going to leave the royal family and they were going to move to the U.S. Do you all remember why? You remember the Oprah interview, right? All the memes? What? Right? So they left the royal family because of racism in the family. And they were getting ready to have their little boy, right? I can't think of his name, but they had just had their child or getting ready to have their child. The family wasn't quite feeling it. So racist language and behavior caused them to flee the family and renounce their royalty. That's a big deal, right? Can you imagine being in your own home with your own family and not feeling like you belong? Because if somebody wants to put a little diversity in there. So then that same January on the COVID line, the red line here, we remember, right, we had started hearing about it. A couple people had gotten sick, right? Maybe you had a friend or two that had gotten really sick and you were like, ooh, stay away from me, right? They just didn't recover and you were like, you are never going to get better, but like, this is nasty, right? That was the beginning of COVID. That's how it started, right? 1 or 2 people with really bad flus, okay? But still not impacting us just yet. So then we move over to March. Right? We come through February, we go through March. Now it's March, and if you were in the area around that time, you distinctly remember starting to get warm out, right? You're starting to plan where you're going for the summer. You're putting PTO in for sure now. Starting to book at flights, starting to book and look at flights, right? Starting to really turn into a hot girl summer, if you will, okay? And the first week of March, you're like, okay, Q1 is done, right? I've been successful, right? Still going well, boom. And then what happens? Boom, no more world, right? So I like to call this point right here in March where the red and blue line get very close, WTF. WTF, you can write that down too. March 2020, WTF. So everybody remembers what happened, right? You all went home, you were sent home, and that was pretty much it. And for those of you who were deemed essential, kudos to you, right? You kept coming into the office, you kept fighting the good fight. But it was hard. It was a really hard fight. And then April hits, right? So now we're at home a little bit. We're just kind of waiting it out. We'll be back in the office soon. You guys remember what you were thinking, right? This will be over soon. We'll be right back. It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it. I get a little vacation for real, right? And then you starting to call your friends and say things like, I'm remote, right? And then things get a little more serious, right? So in April, statistically, job loss and resignation started to happen. Women, frontline workers, and younger age groups were impacted the worst. So now you're losing women, you're using your young employees, and you're losing your frontline employees. That's what's happening now from an HR standpoint. People are coming in every day telling you I'm not coming back. Or they're not coming in, they're just not coming back. They didn't say anything, right? It just didn't show up. So then we move into May. Who knows what happened in May? May 25th specifically. In May, on May 25th, George Floyd was murdered in broad daylight by a police officer, and the whole world watched for 7+ minutes. And if you didn't have enough on your plate then with COVID and trying to figure out how to make your whole company remote, that day was a breaking point for you, right? That was when I had to put my two fingers together, right? I had to deep breathe, right? I had to take a walk, run 55,000 miles, right? How far did Scott run? That's what happened, right? Because now you are sitting in a space where there is already so much going on. And you've put this on top of your plate. And employees are coming to you, leadership is looking at you, expecting you as their HR to also be their diversity leader. You should know what to do. What, you've never seen social unrest? You've never seen civil rights violated? What? Like, you don't have a plan, right? People are asking, people are demanding you do something. And now all of a sudden you have to come up with a crisis plan or strategy for how it is your organization is going to mitigate this all of a sudden, right? It's on your plate. Did that happen to anybody? No one. Okay, all right. Y'all not being, what do we say? Honest and transparent, right? So then we move on. And then what happens? We come through the summer and then we hit June. So now, because people are reeling, people want to talk about, well, how many of you have heard of Juneteenth? Why aren't we celebrating Juneteenth, right? And for those of you who are not quite tracking, it was made a federal holiday last year. Juneteenth commemorates the day in which slaves were freed in the last slave spot of Galveston, Texas in 1865. And so now people want to loop these together, right? Look what's happening to George Floyd. You don't care about black people. Black Lives Matter signs are going up everywhere. Why aren't we celebrating Juneteenth? Another thing on the HR plate, chuck it on you, right? Feels familiar to no one. All right. Y'all said y'all was in HR last year at this time. I think some of y'all weren't being honest. Okay? So at this point, right, this becomes the first time in which most of America has actually heard about this holiday. And it's like, oh, this is so great, right? But it's like, hey, we've been telling you, right? People have been saying this, it's been around, but let's put it on the forefront. And then what happens, right? We kind of get through the summer, we're struggling, we got all this on our back, all of this on our plate, and then we get into November. So COVID's still going bad, right? COVID is a continual downward spiral. That one never comes, that one doesn't tick back up, right? But in November, if you guys remember what happened, anybody remember what happened in November? Election? Right, there was an election, right? We have every 4 years a presidential election in America. Okay, all right, we all on the same page. All right, so the first woman is elected to Vice President of the United States. This is a big deal for diversity. And this is not about your political affiliation or who you wanted to win. We're talking about historical data, and we're talking about what is a win for diversity. It's a big deal. Big deal for women, big deal for black people, big deal for advocates, big deal for champions. Okay? That same month, the sitting president signs an executive order. Executive Order 13950. Remember that? Remember what that executive order said? It said that the federal government is now banned from any type of diversity training if you have or receive or touch any federal employees or receive any federal dollars. So at the same time that we elect our first black woman president, vice president, right, political party, at the same time we say, well, now we don't care about making sure that the people who work around her understand why this is important. So it was a whirlwind year, right? So as an HR person, you're saying to yourself, well, I got to do something, right? You're probably asking yourself a few questions. You're probably saying things like, how do I show that the company cares about the employees? Or how can we be more inclusive? How do I show the world that our organization is more inclusive? Were you guys asking yourselves questions like that, right? How do we get our employees to stay? How do we stop the bad press? How do we stop the bleed out? Should we put up a Black Lives Matter sign in our store or not? Should we put it in the break room or not? Some people want to. Are we going to host roundtables? Lots of conversations you were having at that time. And all of this was happening when you were trying to decide whether or not you were going to wear a mask or not wear a mask, right? And so you probably went to your marketing team and said, help, right? Like, we need some help, right? As an HR person, you're like, look, I do a lot of things, right? But I don't make graphics. I don't do pictures, things like that, right? But I can give you some ideas. And you got all these people with really good ideas in the room, and you sat around this table, you had your war room, you're like, this is what we're gonna do. This is it. We are committed. It's gonna happen. We are gonna say to the world what we want them to hear, and we are gonna stand firm on this, right? And so what did you do as an organization? You put that picture up on your website. This is where you started. Tell the truth. This is where you started, right? You went out, you got a stock photo with people of all shades in it, right? And you said, tell the world that you're happy here, right? That's what you said. And meanwhile, none of these employees work for you, right? It's truly a stock photo. Because at the time, you didn't have a photo in your Rolodex that said or looked like this. It didn't deliver the same message. The organization didn't have one. You had some pictures, right? Maybe at the company barbecue, the last retreat, but I guarantee you the pictures that you had were pretty segmented, right? It's our senior leadership looking like old white men, right? And then we got some of our frontline employees looking a little bit more diverse. And then we got our middle management where we got some other folks sprinkled in, right? But you didn't have a photo that was this rainbowed, if you will. And so you just put it up on your website and you said, yeah, that's good. This is it. We are moving in the right direction, right? And then you say, no. Marketing team comes back and says, look, we've got a little time now. I went out, I took some pictures. We put together this graphic. Put this on the website instead. Put this on the website. And these people actually work for your company now. So you're like, whew, right? We're doing okay. We got some people that actually work here on our website saying we're diverse. Very good. We feel good about this, right? Marketing was winning. Look at this guy down here in the red shirt, right? He's trying to get a date too. And so now we're really excited. We are cooking with grease, right? Everybody's feeling really good about this at the senior leadership level. Senior leadership level. And then you say, oh, no, wait. Go ahead and put this up there too. Right? Take these words, take this word cloud, spread these words out over the website so our SEO will hit better when job seekers are, looking for employment. Diversity, religion, philosophy, open door policy, right? Anti-racism, multicultural, right? So you put all these words on your website. You're like, this is it now. Yep, now we've got it. We've got a good picture and we've got some words. That's it. What else do we need? And then you check the box. That was it. Go ahead, clap for yourselves. No, really, yeah, go ahead, right? You did something. And so you check this box on diversity for the summer and you said, okay, let's move into benefit season, right? It's the end of the year. We've done what we can here. Right. All the while, your employees are resigning. Your employees are grumbling. Your employees are posting bad reviews about you online, right? People are steadily walking out the door and you're wondering why you can't get candidates to come in-house. I was a frontline employee, frontline HR person in 2020. And I remember what it was like to recruit that summer. It was hard. It was hard. But you've checked the box. You've done what you can. But this is you, right? Your senior leadership is high-fiving. Man, you guys did a good job. Those pictures, those words, SEO search were up, right? Maybe we got a few more dollars if you were a frontline type of open for business during COVID company. But you are stressed. You are stressed. You're not okay. And what senior leadership at your organization doesn't hear is all of the grumbling, right? All of the people that are coming to your office, sending you these disgruntled emails, dropping their resignations off at your door, or not, you're hearing the frontline employees are not making quotas. Those are the things that are happening to you. But from an outward perspective, it looks like your senior leadership team is pretty happy with what you've done with putting up the pictures and putting up the words on the website. You are not, though. This is you not being happy. But no worries, because we're now 2 years forward, and what you're trying to decide now is, hey, we are invested in making this a go at our organization. Maybe you're saying it to yourself. Raise your hand if you're saying that. I still am committed to what I said I was committed to 2 years ago. And so you still have some of those ideas loading, right? Maybe some of the things actually did come to fruition. Maybe you did put an ERG group together. Maybe those things did happen for your organization and some good things came out of what was a really bad summer. Okay? So tomorrow, what you can do, right, after sitting through this session with me, the rest of it anyway, is you can go and you can take your plans, your strategy, whatever it is you developed 2 summers ago, and you can dust it off, pick it up, and let's reassess where we are and move forward. Does that feel good? 2 hands in the air because y'all starting to sleep on me? All right. Okay, so when I ask a question, y'all say yeah or no. I'll take no too. All right. So now we're going to move forward with the assessment part. So this is what I want you guys to start writing, thinking about, being really critical about of yourselves and honest and transparent. What is your current strategy? Is there a document that is somewhere laying around or on somebody's HR shared drive that talks about what you were going to do when you were committed to diversity 2 summers ago? Where are those ideas? Who owns them? Who is the person that's still leading them if they are? And then who is left? Who were your informal leaders that were championing these projects or initiatives back then? Where are they? Who are they? Who's gone? Who's left? Who's still interested? Who is not so burnt out that you just can't get them to come back and work with you on this type of project again? Who perhaps experienced so much hurt when they tried to do this with you and you just weren't willing to hear it or was a lot of lip service? Because those people are in the organization too, okay? The next one is you want to pull and look at your employee demographics. So all of you in HR have an HRIS. You go, or maybe you have an Excel sheet, right? I don't judge people where they are. But you might want to stop at one of the vendors and figure out who can get you an HRIS if you don't have one. And you want to pull a roster, right? Pull your company roster. If you have multiple locations, pull that too. And you want to sort what kinds of demographic information you actually have access to. So are you able to pull birthdays? Do you have racial demographics in your data? Do you have gender listed as part of your data, right? Let's just get some baseline going of who currently works at your organization, and we'll call it employee demographics. Then we want to say, okay, based on the demographics that we are able to report out on or get data on, what are the barriers these employee groups are facing? And then who are our customers and what barriers are they facing? Now, employees may have said, hey, you know what, we're not necessarily your customers, right? We're your internal customers. Why are we worried about customers external to the organization today? Because we all know as HR folks, while we are not a profit or revenue generating department, we sure as hell support the organizations that do, right? The part of the organizations that do. And so if you are saying, hey, I'm turning a blind eye to the parts of the business that do make money, you are doing HR wrong. And that's a free strategy tip. If you did not know that, if you are not worried about the revenue generating sectors in your organization, let's pivot, right? Maybe you should go into finance or something, right? But we want to know whose barriers we are able to address based on who is in our organization and who is based on our customer set. And then the last thing I want you to consider is if you are in any way a remote or hybrid setting, how it is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is showing up in those spaces. And it's something as simple as you asking me to turn my camera on is making me feel a little less belonged today. Because perhaps I'm on a call with a senior executive and they're sitting in their beach house with the beach behind them, right? And I'm sitting in my kid's bedroom with their toys and stuff. What's that? The tyke toys or trucks or whatever they got in the background, right? And it becomes very clear that there's a disparity between us and that we are not the same. We cannot relate. And now I'm feeling a little less belonged. So there's lots of studies. If you're interested in it, I can send you guys some articles around psychological safety on Zoom and Zoom being a divider in the diversity world. But that's a thing, right? Something to think about, right? How are the little things that we've had to pivot to in the remote world also causing additional hurts for the diversity efforts and initiatives? Okay, I see people writing. That was good. Okay, that was something. Okay, that was something to write. Okay. All right, we move forward. Give you a second to look at this. It's a lot. There's a lot going on here. Raise your hand if you've seen this graphic before. Just a few of you. Okay. So this is called the dimension of diversity wheel. The very, very blue center there is your personality. And your personality are things like your likes, your dislikes, your culture, your value, your beliefs, right? Those types of things. And your personality is formed a lot of when you were a child. So that stuff is kind of cemented, right? You can change, right? You go away to college, you move to a big city, right? But more or less, your personality is defined as a child. The green outer circle is the internal dimensions. Your internal dimensions basically are things that you have no control over, right? You can't control when you were born. You can't control your race, ableism, right? Like just some things you don't have a whole lot of control over, right? This is what I got. Also, this internal dimension range is a lot of what is physically visible. And this is the same internal dimension set here by which biases, prejudices, and assumptions are made, mostly off the things in the green. Let that sink in. So things that you really have very little control over are the things by which you are going to be judged for and prejudiced against most frequently. Odd, right? Ironic even, okay? The next one is an orange circle called your external dimensions. And I like to call this the piece of cake you get to choose. Most of the things in the external dimensions are choices that you made. Now, maybe some of those choices happened to you a little bit, right? But at any point, you could have dropped the ball, threw your hands up in the air, and walked away from a lot of these things. You have been able to dictate a lot of what happens in the orange space. Also in the orange space, the external dimensions is where you've probably built most of your relationships and decided who you hang out with or who your friends are or your community is in that orange space. And I'll give you a really good example. If you are from the DMV, if you are from Baltimore, heavy, hard, right? You probably really get down with crabs and crab season, right? Raise your hand if y'all get down with crabs, right? Okay. That's y'all thing, right? That is y'all's thing. But that lives in the external dimension, right? That is something that is distinct to y'all. I'm from Florida. Tell you right now, we are not picking crabs in Florida. We're not doing that, right? Give us some crab legs, but we're not doing the pick crab. So that is a thing that is truly determined by your geographical location. And then the one other outer layer, the organizational dimensions in yellow, that is truly your workplace. That is your community. That is your environment in which a lot of you decide to participate in. And this is where, this outer yellow ring, is where most of the transgressions against equity, inclusion, accessibility happen here, right? This is where people step all over these diversity dimensions in this outer ring. Because we can say we've let everyone come in, right? And everyone has a different shade or is on one dimension or another, right? So we've let all the green stuff come into the room, if you will, right? But what are we doing in our leadership roles, on our boards, the work location that I might be stationed at if we have multiple locations, that make people feel a little less included, a little less belonged, right? Little less accessibility to leadership and opportunities. That's what happens in that yellow one. So that's where the exclusion really starts to happen. Y'all still with me? Take a picture of this graphic if you did not. I included the slides, but just in case, right? This is a nice colorful one. You can go home and tell your kids about it, or your partner, whatever. Whoever's waiting at home when you get home. Like, no judge here. I'm not stepping on toes. All right. So then you say, okay, Ciera, you've done a lot of telling us about what's really going on. Let's talk about a solution. And this is the look forward part. This is where we're going to start to look forward. There are 15 benchmarks on here. And this is for free, y'all. Like, I gave this to you guys for the free. So if you do not have or have not printed the slides, this is the money shot right here. I probably shouldn't even put all this on here, but I did, right? I'm so grateful, so kind. So 15 different metrics by which you could decide if your organization is doing the right thing and moving towards diversity initiatives that are impactful in the workplace and increase belongingness. So the first one is employee resource groups. Everybody heard of those? Okay. Next one is data and metrics. So making sure that you are pulling data and looking at metrics that really start to chart diversity work. Having a diversity committee is another. Do you have one? Right, can I see a show of hands if you have a diversity committee at your organization? That's good. Looks like maybe a third of y'all. Okay. D&I survey, and D&I is diversity and inclusion. Diversity goals up here, and there are two offshoots to this. The first one is your diversity goals are tied to business objectives. So remember how we talked about revenue earning sectors in your organization? Are there any diversity goals tied to that part of the business? And then diversity goals tied to performance reviews. So tied to your money, tied to your pay, tied to your promotion, right? People care a little bit more when they're impacted directly. This one right here, a big one, transparent, equitable wages in the workplace. So is everyone in the same band with the same level of experience being paid the same money? Or if I took a chart and put a blind meter on the names, I would see big discrepancies. Don't raise your hand, but you know, you look at the numbers. The next one, diverse pipeline initiatives. So this is distinct to recruitment efforts. Where are you sourcing your employees from? Now, we all know employees are a little bit more scarce these days, but if you are digging in barrels trying to find recruitment efforts and trying to find new hires in your organization, where are you intentionally looking? Next one is BIPOC and women executive leadership. Stepping on toes yet? No? Okay, everybody still good? All right. Dedicated D&I leader. So this is not the, oh, well, you do HR, and so you can do diversity too, right? 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 With no extra pay. Just do it. Diverse ownership. Who owns your organization? Is there equity in the organization for diverse employees? Community partnerships. Are you putting your money where your mouth is? Are you in the community? Are you doing the right things? Are you partnering with the right organizations? Mentorship programs. And I'm talking about for those of you who have college pipelines or college programs in your organization. Are you mentoring those employees? Are you closing the gap for them? Because there's a gap, right? Equitable hiring and promotion practices. This one steps on toes quite a bit. So who's getting promoted? Is it the person out playing golf with the boss on Saturday because they had access to this person, because they were very similar to them, because they had similar backgrounds, or they were in the blue or green rings together? Or is it someone who really put in the merit and the hard work and deserved the promotion? Genuine leadership support of diversity initiatives in the organization. And of course, supplier diversity plans. This is a real hot one if you're in the logistics field, right? Boom. Everybody got pictures of this one? Y'all good? Okay. All right, so what's next? What is next? These are 5 steps. Go ahead, take a picture of this one too. This is good. 5 steps, right? Everybody put a 5 up in the air, a little high five. Because we feel belonged here today. We're all HR. 5, right? 5 steps that you can do when you leave here today to dust off the strategic plans that you had 2 years ago, if you had any, or for you to build from scratch if you have to. So the first one is leadership buy-in. Do not start digging around, picking up plans, talking to people until you go identify who in that senior leadership team is going to support you. Because when the work gets a little bit messy, or people get a little disgruntled, or someone gets unhappy and resigns, you're going to want to be able to stand firm that there is someone on the executive team that supports what you're doing and has had your back from the beginning. So go find out who that is, how they feel, what their priorities are. The next one is assessment. So I've given you all the steps, right, of things you can go do to assess where you are today and figure out what's next for you and your organization. And then you want to start benchmarking. So of those 15 things on that slide now, which of them do you have data on, and where are you currently on that spectrum? Then you want to start creating goals. So now you know where you are. Maybe some of the things are truly zero. Maybe you don't have a supplier diversity plan. Okay, that's where we are today. But what is on the gold list for us to be able to say on the other side of this, it looks like this for success, for diversity in our organization? And then the last one, we want to track progress, right? We measure what matters. So if you're an OKR team, right? Woo woo. But you want to be able to track what you've done, where this has gotten you, where it's going. So when someone says, well, what are we even doing? Well, what you know is that we are now more aligned with the Fortune 500 companies, and we're 40% diverse in our organization. Boom, right? Get out my face, right? Don't cut the check, right? We don't have to keep talking about this. I'm winning. So those are the kinds of things that you want to be able to say are happening in the organization to show that you are truly moving the needle forward when it comes to diversity initiatives, okay? Some pitfalls. So some things that if you are going to go do those 5 things, don't do these 5. So the first one is DEI 101, appointing the black employee just because they're black. Don't do that, right? Leadership, allowing just anyone to start leading your diversity initiatives. And I'm not saying that everyone can't be involved, but I want to make sure that if you have someone leading the efforts, that this is someone who is truly invested for the right reasons. Finances. Make sure finance has a few dollars for you to allocate towards survey, maybe pulling some additional survey data, maybe bringing in a speaker or a trainer like myself, right? To help you get these things off the ground. Doing some of this work for free, right, or having no dollars allocated is going to be a tough lift. And then you want to make sure that you choose your words wisely, right? You want to be very intentional when you start saying, hey, we're doing diversity initiatives. Okay, so that means we're only interested in making the room diverse, but we don't care about inclusion? Okay, that may be the strategy initially. But I want you to be very conscious of what you select and what you say the organization is going to do and be committed to. And then the last one is branding. A lot of what happened in 2020 was marketing saying, hey, we'll make this better, right? Let's put some pictures out there. Let's issue some statements. But that was not the true effort of the organization, and those inside the organization felt that it was insincere, and you probably did more harm than good by putting out those types of PR releases, okay? So I measure the mark of every presentation session workshop that I do based on how many people pull out their phones. So if you would just go ahead and pull your phone out now, I'll know you're listening. And then you can just go ahead and connect with me there. And if you have any questions about diversity, getting your diversity off the ground, how it is you can grow the diversity initiatives you might be working on, or if you identify as a diverse person and you are looking for a mentor or coach to help you navigate what authenticity looks like in the workplace, insert braids, you should reach out to me. Everybody got it? I should have the equivalent of 300 LinkedIns waiting for me in just 2 seconds. And then here, I'm going to raffle off a 45-minute diversity planning session if you take my survey today. So how it works, you take survey, I take all those who entered, I raffle off, I do a randomizer to raffle off one 45-minute diversity planning session or coaching session to you as a survey taker. And that pops right up too. You see that? You see what I did there? So I will open the floor to questions. I think that's the next thing, right, David? Yep. All right.
I'm going to have to grab my phone. I left it up there.
Oh, no, I'll bring it to you. Look.
Probably got so many missed calls right now. All right.
I'm looking at all your text messages. JK, David.
I'm glad it didn't vibrate while you were up there. Okay. Any questions from the audience in person?
And if you have questions, I want you to know that I know and everyone else in the room knows that you're not talking about the current organization you work for.
Oh, perfect.
Hi, Ciera.
Hey.
First, just I want to thank you. This has been very fun and engaging. Having been a DI, practitioner within HR, we've done a lot of maturity assessments, and so I just wanted to get your feedback or just suggestions on what are the best assessments that you've seen out there as you start to assess your organization.
Yeah, so there are so many organizations that have popped up who now do some type of DEI assessing, right? And it really depends on your budget and what your organization is willing to spend. So you have some assessments who are going to, I'm not even kidding you, for 10K, right? One of those is, and no plug here, right, but I'm just gonna tell you some names. So one of them is Canaries. Canaries is one, and it's spelled with a K. Another one is Vital, V-I-T-Y-L, and Vital is actually in beta right now. And so if you were interested in getting in and understanding what belonging looks like, feels like, smells like in your organization, you can get in with Vital for free in their beta stages. Vital, V-I-T-Y-L.
I've got one online. For inclusion, what advice do you have for HR when a CEO and board chair jointly, publicly, and repeatedly recognize as deplorable, highly reported incidents of racism that target people of color that are in the news, though never recognize incidents that target other groups, like violence against AAPI people or anti-Semitism or synagogue bombings?
Is that really what the question says?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Word for word.
All right, so I would say if you work in an organization like that, barring that you have the ability to do so, you should leave. That is what I say. Because this is an organization who has made it very clear that they don't care about you as an employee, they care about the marketing. Leave.
It's a red flag. Big one. Other questions? Raise your hand nice and tall so I can see you.
Thanks, I agree. You're fantastic. I really enjoyed your animation. Regarding the supplier diversity, I was just curious, do you have a general assessment of how frequently or how many organizations are looking into that? How important is that? I could see that happening at some of our federal and state level, but I was just curious about private or publicly held companies.
Honestly, right, in private, this is not a trend, right? Because if you've locked, and you guys know how hard it is to switch a vendor, right? It becomes like almost an act of Congress to say we want to get a new anything. And so it's just not something that's happening on the private side unless the organization has made a conscious effort to do so, number one. On the federal side, if you think about how they're doing is they mandate it, right? X amount of your contracts have to be minority-owned or women-owned businesses or have to have some diversity to it. So mandating it on the federal side is the only way that you can ensure it's happening. On the private side, it has to be a concerted effort.
Hey, Ciera.
Hello there, Dr. Mello. This lady taught me. She's my professor.
So I still teach our HR analytics course, and my question is, what do you think are the most important diversity metrics that I should be teaching my students to be able to calculate, be able to track, and just a little shout out for the HRD master's program at Towson. We're over there, and she is a graduate. Thank you, Ciera.
Go Tigers. Yeah, so I say the first one is truly gender. I would start with gender because it's not always possible for you to infuse diversity early on from a racial standpoint, but you can absolutely start to diversify your organization with male, female, gender demographics. And then from there, what studies show, right, is that once you have more females in the workplace, go ladies, right, your workforce is a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more innovative, right? It's a little bit more open to having conversations that might rub a little bit raw for some other folks. So that's one, right? So gender is the first one I would start with. And then right behind that, I would start to look at timelines, right? So where has the organization been historically? What have been our demographics at each standpoint? And then were there any particular factors that perhaps caused an uptick or a decrease in what diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics or belonging looked like in the workplace along that timeline?
We have time for one more.
I'm glad y'all are asking questions.
I also enjoyed your presentation, very engaging. When you talked about generic language, can you give us some examples of what that might look like if you're trying to appeal to the masses and you don't want to put people off when they hear diversity because they bristle?
That's a good question. So I'll start with a couple of examples. And I don't know that it's always just the words. Sometimes it's the context. So 2 summers ago, Black Lives Matter was plastered everywhere. And it started to feel very generic because the organizations putting those signs up or putting that on their website weren't doing anything for their diverse employees. So I would say it is a generic language foundation if the organization is using buzzwords, using anything from that word cloud, but then at the same time not doing anything to really spur change or initiatives in the organization. If anyone starts screaming diversity at meetings just because, out of context, you know that's that generic language we're talking about.
All right, if there are no other questions, one more time for Ciera.
Woo, 2 hands in the air. Look.
And if you wanted to ask a question, again, refer to the Whova app. You can ask it in the app. I think it comes up as anonymous if you want to if you want to ask a more sensitive question, or you can approach Ciera in person. She'd be happy to answer some questions as well, I assume, right?
Yeah,
all right, all right, awesome. So one more time for Ciera. I know many of you are kind of side-eyeing the peripheral of the room right now. You hear the plates clanking. The Martin staff will be around to dismiss your table one by one, so don't go up there and hover. Nobody likes a hoverer. So wait till they come and dismiss you for lunch. In the meantime, you do have another lunch speaker coming up. Actually, I need to switch this PowerPoint right now, so if you'll give me 1 minute to do that, I will entertain and delight the senses while you are waiting to get called.